Hello from ABA Midyear Meeting 2017 in Miami, Florida. I'm Lawrence Coletti.
I'm Brian Willis.
I'm Andrew Corge.
And I'm Councilman Mike Suarez of Tampa.
And we're on the road with Legal Talk Network. And we're back. We're here with an esteemed panel of guests. We're going to talk a little bit about road rage. And so I think it's going to be, I know it's a serious topic, but hopefully we'll have a little fun with it. And so just as some background information, I didn't know too much about, admittedly, did not know too much about road rage. And so I did a little research and I discovered that Miami apparently oftentimes becomes the road rage capital of the U.S. Is this true?
I live here and have for many, many years, and absolutely. And look, I'm a victim. Of our traffic and transportation here in Miami. So it's real.
So this is Andrew Gorge talking to us right now about his own experiences, and you guys just got fresh out of a session talking about that. We definitely want to learn more about it, but you know what I think we ought to do before we get into the details? Why don't we learn a little bit more about you? Where do you work? What do you do? And what do you guys say we start with Councilman?
Well, I'm a councilman in the city of Tampa. I'm the chairman this year for our council, and in addition, I serve on the board for our bus system. So when we were talking about road rage earlier on today, it's about all the transit options that you have so that you don't have to be angry in traffic. You have other things to do, and we talked a little bit about some of those options. But I'm a part-time city councilman, believe it or not, a city the size of Tampa, they only have part-timers. And I'm also in the commercial insurance industry. So for me, it's a great thing to talk about because transit is really our future. It's also our past, but we have to figure out how to marry what we've already tried to do and what we're going to do in the future.
Okay, Andrew.
Sure. So Andrew Corge, I work for a company called Lynx, Lynx. It's a boutique private equity firm that owns and operates portfolio companies in real estate, technology, and financial services. It was exciting to be on the panel with my good friends here because, we desperately need, to start, rethinking how we're going to approach transportation in the 21st century. So it was a great opportunity to discuss that topic.
And Brian.
Brian Willis. I'm an attorney with Shoemaker, Lupin, Kendrick in Tampa, Florida, predominantly practicing in the areas of business and real estate litigation. And I've got involved in transportation issues and been an advocate for improving the transportation system because I'm from Florida originally and from Tampa, went to law school in Washington, D.C., lived there without a car. When I came back after graduating from law school in 2007, got really engaged in trying to fix the area's transportation system and been involved in that since.
Well, fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And so just, I don't know, for the benefit of our listeners, I'd also like to maybe talk about some statistics. So road rage, is a pretty new topic to me. I've heard it, as years go by. And for me, I have the image of somebody like flipping somebody off and then cutting them off in traffic. But I know it's more serious than that. And so maybe, do you guys have some stats that we could share with our listeners?
Well, on the way here, actually, someone gave us the bird when we pulled a little too far forward. So I don't know if anyone else caught that, but it was a nice moment. So that's my statistic.
Okay.
Well, and this is Mike Suarez. One of the things that we know about road rage is that the amount of time that people spend in their cars. So as an example, in Tampa, on average, most people who are going into the downtown central business district probably spend about 45 minutes in their vehicle prior to getting into town. Because of that, they actually do get a little bit more angry, more anxious. They start their day in a bad place, and it doesn't usually get better from there, depending on what their jobs are. So for us, we understand that time is money. Money is what we go to work primarily to do. And then, unfortunately, the amount of time that we take to get back to our families takes too long, and that causes us to be a little bit more angry when we are driving around.
Well, my favorite question from the panel was that gentleman, right, who spoke up at the end, and he said, he was probably, he identified himself as a baby boomer, and he said, he asked you, Councilman, he said, what was your first car? He's getting at that love of the vehicle. And then he says, that's my space, within that car. And, we were talking a lot about driverless technology and how changes to technology are going to drive how people use vehicles differently. And he was saying, look, when I'm in that vehicle, I'm the only one that's a good driver. It's my space. I own it. It's everybody else that's the problem. And that's one of the interesting things about driverless technology and how it's going to impact all of this is people's perception of vehicle ownership, people's personal space. What if you take out the driver from that technology situation and then you've got people there? But for him, for that guy, he loved his first car. He asked us what our first car was. He doesn't want to lose his car, but everybody else is the problem.
Well, and we said to him, I mean, look, it's true that folks love their car and they may not want to give it up, and they certainly wouldn't have to. But at the same time, if you could spend more time with your kids because you have a driverless car that can go get your groceries for you, and you can actually do work on the way to office, and that, because of your car driving itself, there are a lot of benefits there, that we have to realize with driverless cars.
So I want to hit a point that Councilman Suarez was talking about earlier. So, people spend this time in their car and they're getting agitated on the way to work. And so this isn't a new problem. And people have been driving cars to work for a long time. And so I look at cars today and they're magical. They've got like Bluetooth. You can hook up your cell phone and listen to whatever you want in the world. You can listen to any song in the world. You can listen to podcasts, hopefully. And so what is going on where we're seeing, is it a rising instance of road rage? Is there something happening within the American persona that's causing us to be more angry behind the wheel?
I find I'm a millennial, and I look at this attitude about, I go that gentleman, that sort of attitude, the car is freedom. I think for me, I've never seen the car as freedom because, yeah, you're stuck in traffic. I love to look at old photos of like the highway system or California. When they first built it, it was wide open space. And so I think there is this, we continue to grow in population, we continue to grow in density. There's been a movement back towards urbanism, and so you're seeing more congestion and more traffic with how our land use patterns are, how sprawl is developing. And I think there is actually a substantive change that traffic is worse than it was, maybe 30, 40 years ago.
And it's frustrating. I mean, again, these days, both folks in home work and you've got kids that aren't getting enough attention, and, you're working extra hours because of your iPhone. You're always on call. And we lose all this time going back and forth to work. And that's time where we should be spending with our family or rejuvenating, for work and whatnot. So that leads to a lot of frustration.
And you have to think about it. The way that cars operate now in terms of the newer vehicles, they're very expensive pieces of equipment. It probably is, if not your second most expensive item outside of your home, it's close to it. And you're thinking to yourself, here I am, I've got this wonderful car that's supposed to be a wonderful experience, and now I'm stuck in traffic. And the old adage, and I think Brian touched on this, is that I'm a great driver, everyone else is a terrible driver. And we get into that mentality that I can't understand why that guy is doing this. And Andrew mentioned the one finger salute that we got, and he has a wonderful vehicle that is telling you when you're about to collide. It's got all kinds of different features, and so he's actually better prepared to make sure that he isn't causing someone problems. But guess what? You're always going to cause someone else's problem because you are the problem in everyone else's mind. And that's what really causes a lot more of that stress and anxiety, and we have to get away from that. And part of the reason why we talked on this panel, which is how do we now solve some of the legal issues that deal with solving transportation issues and not just talk about what we're doing now. What are we going to do in the future?
So I heard, a little bit more emphasis on public transportation. Obviously, we have Uber, and soon there will be driverless cars in great prominence in the cities, I believe. And so, those are certainly things that could kind of bring down the amount of drivers on the road, or at least make the driving experience a little more pleasurable. But what were some of the other solutions you guys were talking about in terms of bringing down the road rage?
Well, I think technology is a big one, right? We're looking at dramatic changes in what's coming over the next 5, 10 years to that. It's going to really change how this is. I think part of the concerns, and it was one of the questions we got during the panel, was, well, what does that mean for me if I don't want to use driverless technology? What if I just want to be my own driver? And I think you're going to increasingly see conflicts, new conflicts that are going to open up between these kind of technologies. So, one positive aspect of it is maybe, you can sit back, you can play words with friends or, text or whatever you want if you have a driverless vehicle. But you got to also think about that percentage of the population that doesn't want to give it up. They're going to be increasingly in conflict with the changes. So maybe there's some new sources of road rage that are going to come from those late adopters and people that, still are using their flip phones instead of getting an iPhone.
Well, and, look, I think it's going to fundamentally transform our society once driverless cars become adopted by, a lot of consumers, because a car may not be a possession that you own by yourself anymore. I mean, there could come a moment where Uber is basically you pay a monthly fee, and maybe it's subsidized by the government to help low-income folks, and an Uber will pick you, a driverless Uber, will pick you and 4 or however many people up every morning. But again, if people are buying a lot less cars, what's going to happen to car companies and those jobs? If there are fundamental changes that we're going to see, and we're just not prepared for it right now. And folks like Councilman Suarez are the few that are actually talking about these things at the political level. But we need more elected leaders to step up and start thinking.
And that's why we talk to lawyers first, because any of the things that we're going to deal with on a policy part, we need to have legal sufficiency for some of these ideas. And we thought it was a natural to talk about some of these issues to the Young Lawyers Division of the ABA. So for us, it makes total sense. Let's try and solve some of the issues before we get to them, so that we're prepared for the future.
Well, and I think it's also important to note that automation is going to fundamentally change our lives. It's not just taking away taxi driving jobs or Uber drivers and them losing their jobs. If you go to Seattle, where they passed a living wage of $15, McDonald's now lets you order from a tablet. So those jobs are going to disappear soon. And this has been happening for decades, but now it's starting to, become more prevalent. And oh, by the way, lawyers, I hear that some legal jobs are disappearing because of software, slowly but surely. So as a society, we need to be prepared for that. We need to start teaching every single child how to code, build robots, work with 3D printers, advanced skills, so they can survive in the 21st century.
Well, Andrew, let's hope that we don't have a lawyer listening to this in his car, because that might be a different type of road rage where he's not going to have a job.
All right. Well, and Andrew, you're working on cybersecurity issues as part of your portfolio of issues that you work on, and you talk about these driverless vehicles. They're going to be connected to the internet. I mean, how does that play out? People hacking into vehicles.
It's a huge problem. I wrote an op-ed last week, and hacking and cybersecurity used to be an issue just for national governments and global conglomerates. Now it's becoming an issue for local governments and medium-sized businesses, and law firms are certainly at risk. And with a driverless car, if someone breaks into that, they could cause a problem.
Right.
You could crash.
City of Tampa has a fleet of vehicles, as do most. They have these fleet programs, and what happens if some hacker comes in and all of a sudden shuts down and says, you got to pay us $1 million if you want to drive your vehicles anywhere, City of Tampa.
Yeah, and there are potential solutions out there. There's what's called quantum encryption, which is being developed, by the U.S., China, and others. And allegedly it's impossible to break into that, at least at the moment. So there are some solutions out there. You just need to be proactive about it, at all levels. And a lot of law firms really are being proactive with cybersecurity, which is great to hear. Now we just need others to follow suit.
Yep.
Well, in terms of the future, 5 years from now, where do you guys think we'll be?
Well, I think we'll be on our way to having some form of autonomous vehicles. It'll probably be very primitive at that time, because you need to make sure that the road patterns and road networks are going to accept some of these autonomous vehicles. But I do think that we're going to have a lot more technology partnerships between public entities like bus systems and other transit agencies with other private providers like Lyft and Uber, Zipcar, and then all the other autonomous vehicles like Tesla. In Tampa, in our bus system, we are actually partnering with Tesla to provide what they call first mile, last mile solutions. And so we eventually think that Tesla will be there with us as a autonomous vehicle, helping to provide that same type of service.
And this is what I'm saying. I mean, if we had more elected officials like Councilman Suarez who were thinking into the future and thinking about these types of partnerships, we'd be better off. But look, in 5 years, almost every major car company, BMW, Volkswagen, Tesla, GM, you name it, will have a fully autonomous, capable car. And actually, there's even a system being developed by Delphi and Mobileye that can have an autonomous system put onto any car. So we will absolutely have cars that have that capability. The question is, how much will people use them? I can tell you that my car lets me take my hand off the wheel and my foot off the pedal for 30 seconds at a time, and it's great. Gives me extra flexibility. I can play chess, do whatever I want on the road, and it's safe. So we will have that capability there in 5 years. I think in 10 to 15 years, with the right leadership at the political level, we could have, significant consumer adoption, maybe 25%. With driverless cars.
I mean, I think these guys are exactly right. I think from a legal perspective, it's interesting what's going to be the challenge of the next 5 years is developing that regulatory and policy framework that really copes with all the technology changes that are coming. I do in my real estate space, I deal a lot with shared ownership communities, and you think of condos or timeshares where, instead of buying property in fee simple, you're buying a week or you're buying a unit or a piece of air, that virtual unit that exists. And I think we're going to start seeing some of these shared ownership community concepts starting to blend with car ownership concepts, and where you might not be buying a car, you might be buying a car and a half or a car and 3/4. And I mean, that's going to be a big advantage for consumers if there's the regulatory and legal and policy framework in place to deal with it.
Well, if we don't know who owns it, who's going to wash and wax it?
Well,
Robots.
That's a great way. Uber, we talked about Uber, and Uber's losing all this money. They want to get rid of the drivers. That's their plan. Well, the drivers wash and wax the cars. So what do you get rid of the cars? Then the Uber's got to go out to some central wax depot that's probably going to have automated robots that do some automated washing of your automated car.
It'll operate like Costco or something. I don't know. Well, gentlemen, I just have one last question for you. We put these podcasts out for attorneys, and we're putting them out with the American Bar Association, of course, through our network as well. And so, if our listeners out there want to get involved, learn a little bit more about what they heard today, how can they reach you, Councilman Suarez?
Well, they can reach me at Mike.Suarez, and that's spelled SUAREZ at TampaGov.net.
Andrew.
They can tweet at me at Andrew Korge, ANDREWKORGE. And I will respond at all times.
And Brian.
Yeah, Brian Willis with the law firm of Shoemaker, Loop, and Kendrick. That's a great way to find me. I'm also on Twitter at Brian Willis TPA for Tampa.
Well, it looks like we've reached the end of the road for this episode today, but I want to thank our guests for joining us today and also our listeners for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard today, please rate us on iTunes. We'll see you next time for another episode of On the Road with Legal Talk Network. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.